Evening to the PWHL faithful that have been tuning into us all year. We're going to have a pretty exciting bit of content tonight as we dive into PWHL Boston's victory over PWHL Montreal last night in Game 3 of the Walter Cup semifinals. Was a phenomenal game. Having been there in attendance, myself and Damien. Really just a phenomenal experience to be there, to see that, to be a part of that. Just absolutely incredible experience. A great game, a great performance, a great win. Definitely a lot of talking points heading into the series, or into the game, and the series. Ultimately, just an all-around phenomenal etc. As I once again fight with Instagram and their live client to get people into the live stream. As I get here, I came to a revelation just now about the officiating crews. Really reviewing the officiating crew from last night. Saw Jake Kramris was working as an official, and it really struck me. I'm like, this is an unbelievably familiar name, and I'm trying to place why this name is so familiar to me. And then it dawned on me about 4 or 5 minutes before we hopped on this podcast that I went to college with him at UMass Lowell for several years. Having played on our team when I was there, his senior season was the final year of UMass Lowell's good run, 16-17. He was on their last Hockey East Championship squad. So, pretty cool to see Jake officiating at the Songus Center last night, even if his calls were not the favor of the home team at the rink he used to play at back in his heyday.
Interesting.
Yeah, it took me like 24 hours to figure out where I knew that name from.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
It's actually a pretty impressive crew. Foucher, DePuzzo, and Cameras last night are all active AHL referees outside of the PW.
Wow, it's pretty dope. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've seen worse games as far as like that goes, but no, I love the crowd and like obviously I know we're both really disappointed when we got there because it's like not even 2,800 people, but I'm really proud that like I feel like last night definitely is one of those things where I feel like it was great to see how loud it was, and I think that was definitely a huge part that really definitely helped fuel the team. Where like especially in the third period, where again everyone's just going crazy off of every little play, whether it was a stick check, whether it was just passing it up through the neutral zone, breaking up plays, winning puck battles. So that was by far the best atmosphere I've ever been to at any hockey game.
Absolutely. Don't mind me. I am just once again fighting with Instagram's client to see why it's taking forever to process Kelsey into the feed, which is very
I mean,
sad.
I see her,
Oh,
but I don't know if
all
you
I
can.
all I have on my end is a spinning wheel of death.
Yeah, I mean, I can see her, so I think she's in. I don't know if you can hear
Yeah, I'm in.
Oh, awesome.
her.
Yeah, it's been weird for me. To be fair, I had the same issue when Matt hopped on the other night of I didn't even get a screen for him on my end. I could just hear him. I couldn't see him. So with those opening statements about how small the real world really is, I will kick this over to Kelsey to really, open this up with a bang on, her perspective, her take as somebody who could see the game from the eagle eye view, where Damien and I were seeing the game of how do we support these guys from where we're sitting.
Very jealous about that, by the way. That was an amazing game. Oh my god. Being in a 2-0 series lead did not make it any less stressful at home because like being a Bruins fan too, like no lead in the playoffs is safe. So I was stressing until overtime. Regardless of how that game went, we still would have had our series lead, but so many things to stress about.
Oh yeah, I mean, unfortunately, once Montreal scored the second goal, Liam down in the comments already knows where the statement's going to go. Once that second goal went in for Montreal, Damien looked at me and was like, "Well, this game's over for them." Just because Liam, our editor here at Black Stitch, is the ultimate propagator of the term "the two-goal lead is the worst lead in hockey," and for what feels like the 8,000th time this year across every league we cover, once again, his adage turned out to be true.
It was rough. They definitely had a slow start again. I feel like that's how Boston is. Like they kind of take a while to get into the groove. Like I feel like our first periods are usually the worst, but like I feel like our third periods are probably like our best periods, honestly.
Yeah, if I've been at I want to say two games this year where they got out to a 3-0 lead in the first period against Minnesota back in January and Montreal obviously on May 4th, and both of those games were a 4-3 win, Minnesota coming in overtime, and then Montreal obviously being the Fratkin goal. But like, I feel like they're better when they start slow, because when they've started hot, then you're just hanging on by the edge of
Yeah,
your seat because they've really had trouble holding multi-goal leads this year.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely helpful when we start behind and then we figure it out.
Yeah. And Courtney Kessel, as she referred in the post game, interview, pretty much was like we knew they were going to come out hot because we've seen elimination games. Like I was really impressed with Minnesota in Game 3. I thought that they came out and they dominated the entire game. And when you get outshot 18-4 in the first period, fortunately, again, having Aaron Frankel in net is huge because again, getting out of that period with only being down by one was huge.
Oh,
100%.
absolutely.
I heard there were Frankel chants at the game at some point too.
Yeah. It was, I think, during one of Montreal's early power plays. And I don't think I've ever been to a game where, like, the crowd just kept chanting for the goalie. And every save, for me, it felt like it was one of those things where if I were Montreal, it just looked like every time they shot the puck, they did not want her to stop it because I swear it almost sounded like there was a goal every time she stopped the puck just because of how loud the home crowd was.
Yeah, I can't think of another time where a crowd was so behind their own goalie where every save was a cheer. And I know that everybody in here belongs to various PWHL communities. On social media, saw the narratives and all the takes about oh, there's nobody there. It looks like a small crowd, so on and so forth. I think that by the end of the third period, with just how committed the crowd was to every Boston positive event that occurred, you could feel the momentum with each subsequent Boston play that occurred.
Yeah.
And you got to give so much credit to how Boston came back. And I was talking to Damien about this a little bit last night, but just watching that third period come back, Boston just, they just changed their game plan, and like it's kind of counterintuitive to say it, but like they just started playing the dumbest hockey that I've ever seen, but in a good way. Of like Sophie Shirley going 1v4 down low against ABN was so reckless and kind of insane that, of course, it worked. And then, Pelkey effectively selling out a good read on her end of the defenders on the power play for Montreal didn't read her in the gaps. But just absolutely selling out where if that doesn't work, it's a 5-on-3 with 4 minutes left. So props to Boston for quite literally throwing caution to the wind in the third period of that game, as if they were the team whose season was on the line.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, Boston honestly, with how they fed out in the third period, is incredible because when Tapani got hurt, I mean, the crowd was dead silent, and it was a really scary scene. And I feel like for a team when you're down and you're trying to come back and you lose a star player to an injury, and again, from our angle, I couldn't tell, if it was just a big hit, if it was just from the fall, if something, if it was a knee on knee that got caught somewhere or whatnot, but just the fact that they were able to rally back and that she led, I believe, all players in ice time last night is just insane.
And scored the OT winner.
Yeah.
Did she have the most time on ice?
Yes, I have the TOI open in
34,
my
yeah.
background, yeah.
For both
Yeah.
teams.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
She took that
my
personally.
I mean, to come back from whatever that rough play was, the Teemu Solani comparisons I made after game one surfaced again here after game three. It's pretty much the highest compliment I can give to a Finnish-born hockey player. Just absolutely phenomenal run for her. Truly an iconic playoff run so far for Tapani. I mean, I don't think a lot of, I know, but I don't know. Just the way that series went for Boston to only get 2 goals out of their top six, and for those 2 goals to be um, the game winners in the first and third game, where effectively their third line and their bottom six effectively matched out, Montreal's coveted top six. And I was really thinking about earlier how I do wonder how much Courtney Kessel talked to her brother-in-law, Phil, going into this series. Because, Boston was playing a really heavy grind game the entire series. And I think back to Phil Kessel with the 2016-17 Pittsburgh Penguins Cup run. We all know Phil Kessel is notoriously lazy hockey player, a very out of shape legendary goal scorer. But I recall and I'm going to quote him directly, after the 17 Cup run of, Sidney Crosby's the best fucking grinder in the world. And, we really saw this Boston team embrace that where, Hillary Knight, Alina Mueller, Susanna Tapani, like, in her first game back, Jamie Lee Rattray, like, skilled players just grinding, getting into the boards, the tough battles, taking away space, sacrificing the body to make the play, and just doing the things that star players don't normally do.
I will give credit to Jillian Dempsey. Again, when you look at ice time, I mean, I think she only played for 338, but in that 338, she had that incredible stick save when the puck was on the red line. Because that was probably the most confusing series of events being at a game where the whole crowd erupts. We're like ecstatic. And then all of a sudden it's like they just wave off the goal, give us the power play, and there's no explanation. And that's why we're all like, and kudos to Jillian Dempsey for making her time. But it's also, I want to hit a quick point that you'd kind of talked about last night, Christian, was, and we look at, again, some of the communities where they're like, oh, well, Boston isn't exciting. They shouldn't have won, all this stuff. Everybody wants to see Canada on Canada, and I get it. But the thing is, I haven't seen anybody really I'm not gonna say point the finger, but like kind of look in the series and be like, well, what went wrong? And the big thing is coaching in postseason is huge. I know we talked about the other night a bit, but like when you look at Corey and after game two, where you make it public that they were celebrating too loud, they think that they already won. You're giving this team bullet material to go out and play even harder against you in game three. And on the Montreal side, I'm kind of disappointed because, even you look at, I don't know if you guys saw the post-game press conferences for both coaches, but like, with Corey kind of sweeping it under the rug, like, yeah, one team just had a lot of pushback, we dominated them for 2 periods, and then I guess they supposedly wanted to win in 60 minutes, and they pushed back in the third. And even with hey, we outplayed them 10 out of 12 periods, and I guess it wasn't enough. And it's like, well, I'd like to see maybe some accountability on her end because, like, for game three, and I think it's a huge point of, you look at ice time, you look at rolling your lines and preserving players. And, like, I get it. You want to double shift your top players, but just to go through a list. But when you look at Montreal's top on ice players from game three, you had O'Neill at 28-28, Daou at 27-21, Ambrose at 26-30, Stacey at 24-47, and Poulin at 24-9. And O'Neill, Daou, and Ambrose all had a -2. Stacey had a -1, and Poulin had a 0. Now, on the flip side, before I go to the flip side, but like when you look at that, majority of forwards. Now, we look at Boston. In your top six, obviously you had Tapani, who was a 34.06. She had a +1. But you look at, Brown, DiGirolamo, sorry, I'm always going to butcher that. But like they both had almost 30 minutes, she had a +1. But then you look at the other three, and two of them, again, it's Mueller, it's Moore, and it's Keller. And, again, +1, +1, +2. And those are 4 to 6 defensemen. So I think that by the third period, Montreal just looked so tired. Stacey did not look like, Laura Stacey that we'd seen the first 2 games. So when I'm looking at that, and then you're hearing the press conference, I'm like, maybe you're going to take some responsibility and be like, hey, man, like, sorry, guys, I might have cost, with my strategy, but yeah. But I also you love Courtney Kessel with the good for her, attitude with the we're going to the championship. So I mean it is what it is.
Yeah,
Coach of the Year
I think that
finalist.
she is a Coach of the Year finalist, and I think there were two things at play. I think Corey Chevry had a lot of things working for and against her. She is a good coach. She had a great regular season. I think really two crucial things. To quote an NBA star, the lights were brighter than expected for her. I think as the coach in the postseason, I think that under the optics of all of Canada being behind her, I think Chevrier very much got really committed to, we have all these stars, we're going to roll them aggressively, but to really reference, I think it was Brad Marchand who said this years ago, and it's a common theme at the top professional level because, and I've said this an unbelievable amount of times on our podcast, but, high-end offensive skill is something you can't teach. It's an innate ability. Anybody can learn to play defense, but world-class offensive skill is a rarity. Having said that, when you look at, Melanie Daou being a -4 on the series, Poulin being a -2, Ambrose being a -2, to quote Marchand on this, when you're playing against high-end generational skill offensive players, there's always more room when you have the puck against them. They're not defending as well as a good bottom six player. So when you're in Montreal and you're playing 28, 30, 32 minutes a night of high-end skill players, there's going to be room. And we saw that. Like was Davienne's save percentage a reflection of her? No. It's a reflection of Montreal didn't play their best defensive players consistently. They played their best offensive players who were always looking to create offense. And unfortunately, sometimes you lose that battle more than you win that battle.
Yeah, I mean, she's still like a 95% save, which is still pretty crazy. I mean, obviously Frankel stopping 141 on 145 is just bananas.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on your end from that very long monologue there, Kelsey?
Yeah, I think they just definitely should have not switched the lines up, but definitely use more of that back defense. I think even they should have played Chuli for one of those games, honestly. Like I'm pretty sure like when she did, she only played like a few, I think she played like one game against us and she beat us. I think it would have been nice to see her. I think she probably could have done something. Like no disrespect to Desbian, but I just think like they should have maybe put her in for some time, especially.
Yeah, I definitely could have seen Chevalier looking to her. And I think it comes back to Chevalier, and really what I didn't like about her interview, and I'm going to precede this with the context from this point of view, because I don't want to come out here as a hater, is looking at this league. I have zero motivation to undermine what these coaches, these executives have done for women across North America and their impacts on the game at all levels. And from the Black Stitch Hockey point of view, we are making our evaluations of coaches specifically at all hockey levels of hockey equally. I will hold a women's professional coach to the same standards as a men's professional coach because it's our job to analyze the play on the ice and the product on the ice as if everybody that played hockey was genderless. Having said that, Chevrier's lack of accountability and really saying that she stands by all of her decisions publicly and a lot of the things she said to the press following the series is just, if she was an NHL coach or an AHL coach after how this series went, saying I would do everything I did again, just tells me that I didn't learn from my mistakes, and I don't think anybody on this team or in this organization should be held accountable for the loss. We ran into a hot goalie, and that's it. Like, yeah, you outchanced, you dominated the micro stats. But the Carolina Hurricanes did that last year and the year before and the year before, and they don't have a Stanley Cup to show for it because they don't learn from their mistakes. So they just go out, they get better players, and they continue to not win, which is why Rod Brendamore, despite having one of the most ridiculous fucking winning percentages in the NHL the last 4 years, could be out of a job if the Hurricanes don't win their current series, and he's going to stand there and say, yeah, I should have made more changes. And Chevrier, you have to at some point say somebody has to be held accountable for this. You didn't go to 5 games, you didn't go to 4 games, you lost 3 games in overtime to a team that has less high end skill than you. Like at some point, there has to be a level of accountability of what we could have done differently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, a little bit of it, and maybe I could be wrong, but with how she kind of sweeps a lot under the rug, it almost kind of gives me like that, that feel that she kind of overlooked Boston a little bit and kind of, even to an extent, kind of sounds like she still thinks that her team is better when, some of it as far as oh, well, we outplayed them the majority, they push back. And for me, like, and I'm not saying it is true. That's just kind of what it feels like to me. But if you do have a coach, and again, that's going to be the number one person in that locker room setting the tone in a series. And I mean, again, in playoff hockey, you need composure, you need leadership, you need discipline. And for me, I mean, if a coach kind of looks ahead and kind of looks down a little bit on the team, not thinking that they're going to beat them, then that's going to affect the entire roster. It's going to affect the entire locker room. And that's why locker room culture is so important. And that's why I do love Rick Tocchet, where, you look at him in Vancouver and he's like, guys, never get too high, never get too low. Just be constant, be steady. Don't feel too much. Just go out, play. And that's why I think Vancouver, I mean, look at what they've done and, not really generating a ton of scoring chances and playing against some superstars, why they did get that far. But not to digress, but I mean, Kessel, I thought she kept a very even head all series. She never looked flustered. She never looked upset, and I think that's huge.
Absolutely. And I mean, with the win for Boston to really shift it back to what they were able to do, weather the storm, turn things around, really rally as a unit and rally as a team, which, one of the things, like Lauren Gable played, I think, one shift last night.
Yep.
But that alone was a catalyst. And I mean, looking ahead for them, like, I think they have the right mindset going into the Walter Cup final. Regardless of who they play, I think they're well equipped, especially with Gable probably being fully healthy in, a week or so when that series starts. So, like, and, and I alluded to this, I've been the biggest Courtney Kessel critic all season. Boston feels like a team that, the grind game's going to work no matter who you play against. Like, if you could grind down Montreal, you can grind down Toronto, you can grind down Minnesota, and it's just going to come down to can you get one past Kristen Campbell or Maddie Rooney / Nicole Hensley when the time comes.
Yeah, I am bummed about Natalie Spooner being out. That is a big loss, but definitely make the series more interesting. But both teams are so good. I mean, so it's either way, Boston. I mean, they're gonna play a good team, but like you said, everything you said, it's true. They're like the ultimate blue collar team. I mean, the fan base is just so behind them with everything. And last night it was incredible because again, I mean, we've gone to HL games and you go to the Garden and one of the three stars is somewhere on the other team. They're getting booed by everybody. And to see, again, obviously series over, but to see Poulin get second star and to see the crowd, cheer for her and give her, that respect is just awesome. That's why I love the PWHL Boston community and fan base.
Uh,
And I heard Poulin wasn't even on the ice at the moment. So
that is
even
correct.
then that is still huge. Like massive respect for this fan base. I knew we were good, but that's just another level.
Awesome. So I will kick it over to you guys for really any, key takeaways you had from the series, anything you look forward to. The floor is yours, whoever wants it first.
Um, no key takeaways, honestly. I just want to know who would you guys, if you guys had to pick who we play in the finals, who would you go with?
I,
So yeah,
for me, I would probably still pick Minnesota. It's not easy because Maddie Rooney has been an absolute game changer for Minnesota. Um, and we did see that their bottom six definitely stepped up last game. I mean, Sofia Kunin looked great. Denisa Krzyzova looked phenomenal. And they did a great job of stretching the neutral zone. I just think that, like, if you can, because again, I feel like if you can stop, Poulin, Stacy, and that power play unit and that top line, those top two lines in Montreal, I mean, we've seen Toronto be able to take away, Heise's ice and Grace Sumwinkle's ice. And so I think if Boston, they match up really well against them. When I look at Toronto's roster, they just, I think they're a better grinding team than Minnesota is, where they have just a lot of really good two-way forwards. The only thing I think Minnesota has in the edge would be, the defensive pairings. Because I think after really the top pairing, I don't think there's a ton of offensive generation from the defensive end for Toronto. But their PK is phenomenal. But again, Boston's just such a good 5-on-5 hockey team.
I mean, honest answer, and I'm about to give you the corporate shill answer rather than the on ice product answer as a business person. Um, Toronto needs to win solely for the value of the narratives for the marketing. not having a Canadian team in the finals would be very painful for the league in terms of revenue and advertising and sponsorship generation. Subsequently, like, the Sarah Nurse, Hillary Knight head-to-head narrative they can push, the Kristen Campbell versus Aaron Frankel narrative they can push. Like, I'm a big fan of Minnesota. I really like their team. I really like their roster. I really like their coach. But for the future of the PWHL and just building the brand, I think a Toronto Boston final does a lot for the league.
I think I agree with you on that one. And whenever I've seen Boston and Toronto, even like on at Songus or even on YouTube on the stream, it's always a great game regardless of who wins. Like it's always intense, it's always great. I think that's what we need in the finals.
I
Yeah,
just don't know if Toronto could handle losing to Boston again. That would be tough.
It'll only work better for the narrative.
yeah. I mean, it's great for year two in the league and year three in the league of Boston just being the Grim Reaper for the Canadian teams. I mean, for the product, for the brand, I mean, that right there is a exactly, to quote, I think it was Bill Daly, the average hockey fan would love to see the Battle of Alberta 10 times a year. And building that hatred between two fan bases, three fan bases, it sells tickets, it sells advertisements, and it, builds this league up to, have a future and a very profitable one at that. Well, I think that's all we've got for our playoff closeout of this first round. Once we may or may not have a primer before game one of the next series. Really depends on what everybody's schedule looks like. If not, we'll see everybody after game one.